So that's how it sounded yesterday from Matt Taylor and Joe Wrights on the Colts radio network. Happy wedding anniversary, by the way, today to Rick Venturi, who normally is in that position with Joe Wrights but was off yesterday. Now, there's a lot to unpack here, and I thought about this last night. When I was at my peak fandom as a fan of different teams, I would get so angry watching games when I felt like the team did not exhibit the same passion that I did, when the team didn't exhibit the same sense of urgency that I had, where a team didn't feel the same sense of magnitude of a game the way I did. It would anger me. And I would say to myself, man, I hope these guys are held their feet to the fire here. I hope somebody needs to ask these guys the questions that I'm yelling at my television. So I totally understand, and I totally respect, and I appreciate that that's the expectation that people have from us today, is that we're going to blowtorch the Colts. And here's the thing. I don't need to. Jimmy doesn't need to. Andy and Kevin don't need to. J&V doesn't need to. And before you, I know you're right now about to touch the dial saying, well, that's it. I wanted to hear the Colts get blowtorched. Before you touch the dial, let me explain. I don't need to do those things. And someone yesterday said, the guys on the radio probably go easy on him because they know that Jim Irsay will take the contract of the Colts games airing and move elsewhere. We've never once been told by the Colts nor our employers that there is any sort of a governor or a limit or a ceiling on the things that we're allowed to say. So we don't need to hide behind that. I don't need to blowtorch the Colts, not because I fear penalty of doing so, but simply for this reason, because they already did it for me. They went out in the most critical game of the year, in the game that everybody in the National Football League knew was one that was going to dictate whether or not they went to the playoffs or not. And they went out there and they absolutely 150% self-inflicted, with no discipline, no effort, no focus, and no attention to detail, and completely wet down their leg and gagged. And many of the things that yesterday reared their ugly head for the Colts are the things that the talking heads, the pundits, have been talking about for 10 months. And we were told, we're just talking heads, we're just pundits. Were we wrong? Were we wrong when we questioned why the Colts have never addressed the tight end position? That's the low-hanging fruit, but I'll go there. Yesterday at the tight end position, they threw 5 passes to a tight end. They completed 3 of them. All right, great. 47 yards out of the tight ends. Yesterday, the wide receiver position, one that we've been saying forever, they need to upgrade at the wide receiver. And Chris Ballard sat with his flat brim hat and his arms folded back when he used to talk to the media. And all he did was mock Kevin Bowen. All Bowen talks about is wide receivers. Well, I addressed the wide receiver. How you like me now? Great. You went out and you drafted a guy that caught 1 ball. It was on the sidelines on an errant throw when your quarterback, who's completing 47% of his passes, sailed one by like 18 yards over to the sidelines. Actually, it was a throwaway. On that particular play, Anthony Richardson was rushed. It was a smart throwaway. But he threw it, and A.D. Mitchell was standing on the sidelines, because why would he be on the field on a 3rd and long? And A.D. Mitchell standing on the sidelines. And actually, I don't think he caught it. It hit him. So, I mean, it was good to see that they knew he was there. And then you wonder, like, why don't they use A.D. Mitchell? Well, I'll tell you why. Because when they finally called his number, he pulled the biggest boneheaded play of them all. A.D. Mitchell got the ball on that trick play and looked around. And I've been in that stadium. I saw Guns N' Roses there. I saw the Colts Broncos there in that stadium, as a matter of fact. I've seen the stadium, and on a day like yesterday, where it's a clear sky in Denver and the altitude, you can see for miles. And A.D. Mitchell sat and looked for miles, and he said, oh, you know what? Look at that. It looks like there's a lady in row 218 that doesn't know I'm about to throw the ball. I better text her. Because I've spun the ball, I've matched the laces, I've turned my body, I've lined it up, I've done like a kicker does and put my arm out and straightened it up to make sure that I'm throwing in the right direction. He couldn't have telegraphed that anymore if his name, like it literally, if he was like doing Morse code. I mean, terrible play from A.D. Mitchell. Terrible. And we haven't even gotten to the biggest GOAT of them all. And by GOAT, I don't mean greatest of all time. I mean, GOAT. Jonathan Taylor. Wonderful talent. No question. Seemingly a nice guy. No question. I don't know him personally. I don't hang out with the guy. But he's seemingly being a good citizen in Indianapolis. Except for when it's time for training camp. Maybe learning when to drop the football going into the end zone was covered in the first 4 weeks of camp last year. When he was sitting on Jim Irsay's bus, holding out for more money. When he played Chris Ballard like a violin. Backed him into a corner and said, I know I play the position that most teams are kind of getting away from, but I want money and I want it now. And I know I'm not there during camp. And I know I'm not there like when you have a quarterback that everybody and their brother knows that we're trying to get acclimated to everything that he needs to see in the NFL. But it's not important for me to be there when Anthony Richardson is learning his craft. And it's not important for me because right now I want to make a trade demand. And I'm going to sit on that bus, and then I'm going to sit in my hooded sweatshirt. Yeah, we'll say it's like my back, and then I'm injured. But then all of a sudden, mysteriously, I come to an agreement, and boom, I'm playing. Maybe that was the time that they were teaching running backs that it looks really cool on TikTok and Instagram videos when you drop the football early and can then, like, do a little dance or whatever and look blasé, like, I do this all the time. See how easy it is? And he's a great runner. But that's the most elementary of play in the National Football League. And what happened yesterday when Jonathan Taylor dropped that football is simple. What it did was not turn that game. What it did was not cost the Colts to literally drop the ball on their opportunity with the season in their hands. What it did was shine the brightest spotlight of all on what the problem of this franchise is. And let me explain in the words of Shane Steichen. Shane Steichen was asked yesterday after the game about Jonathan Taylor's drop. And this is what Shane Steichen had to say, and let me explain to you why that play signifies a hell of a lot more than just simply a boneheaded move that cost the Colts a lead that would have grown, or a command of that game, or a chance to salvage their season. I'll explain after we hear Shane Steichen.
It was a mistake. Obviously, it hurt us, but, he's one of our leaders, and sometimes that happens in football, but, he's our guy, and that's where it's at.
Okay. Chris Ballard, the all-knowing, I'm in year 8, 1 playoff win, sub-500 record, Chris Ballard. Chris Ballard has said to anybody that would listen that sometimes you can take risks on guys because so long as you have good leadership, it sets a tone where then character guys that other people see red flags about, they get brought into and they learn from leadership. Who are the leaders on this team? Apparently it's Jonathan Taylor, according to Shane Steichen. A.D. Mitchell was a guy that came in, red flags, dropped in the draft, didn't go as one of the top 5 receivers or so, even though many thought that he had the wiggle, the talent to be in that position. But he was going to be okay in this offense because they have leaders. And Chris Ballard himself had said that so long as you have veteran leaders that are good character guys, and I'm not saying Jonathan Taylor is a bad person, but as long as you have good leaders on the field, that carries over to the rest of the roster. A.D. Mitchell, who was a red flag guy, made a boneheaded play in the biggest play of his season when they finally decided to dust off A.D. Mitchell. In the biggest play of his season, he made a boneheaded play. You know why? I'll tell you why. Because the leader of the team also made a boneheaded play, and clearly there's no accountability for that because those things happen. There you go in a nutshell. Right there is your problem with the 2024 Indianapolis Colts, because it starts with a culture. And it starts with the culture of the guy that you are telling me is your leader. You're telling me that he's your leader in the same breath that you're not holding him accountable for a boneheaded mistake. And that boneheaded mistake then became obviously contagious because it was also committed by the guy that was a red flag guy that was going to learn from the leadership of the great players that you have out there. Chris Ballard told us who he was when he decided that he had one decision to make, and he hired Josh McDaniel as head coach. A guy that isn't a very good head coach and is a snake at that. And he got burnt by it. Right then, we knew who Chris Ballard was. A guy that when the most important decision is there to be made, he pulls an A.D. Mitchell. He pulls a Jonathan Taylor. He drops the ball a half a yard early when things are at their most critical. And that's why the Indianapolis Colts now, while mathematically still with a chance for the playoffs, are now having to sit and wait and hope that a million different things happen around them, and you are absolutely stuck in the mud, and don't look in the rearview mirror because all you're going to see is mud flapping because you're just sitting there spinning the tires for the 8th straight year. And next year, what's going to happen? Sure, we said at the beginning of the year, this year was all about the development of Anthony Richardson, and I still maintain that's what this year was about. But they haven't done anything to develop him, partially because the guy that is supposed to be the leader is a guy that drops the ball early and makes a mental mistake, and then afterwards we're told, it happens. It happens. Would you bench him for that? Well, I don't know. I mean, he benched himself when he wanted more money, and he got what he wanted out of it, so I don't know. It happens. Jimmy, that was a disgraceful performance, to quote Jim Mora. That was an embarrassment, and that was something that, quite frankly, I'll be honest with you, one of the things that has absolutely 150% been wearing at me for the last couple of weeks. The Yuletide celebration at Hilbert Circle Theater. My dad loves it more than anything, more than life itself. My dad starts in November asking the entire family what dates we can all go to the Yuletide. Can you go to the Yuletide? We're going to do the Yuletide. I know what it means to my family. I know what it means to get that picture of the Christmas tree. The only date that my dad could get the tickets for everybody this year is this coming Sunday, December 22nd. And I thought to myself, you know what? If the Colts are in a position where they have a game that is going to be some home playoff game to punch some sort, division title. I'm talking about like back in September when this came out. I told my dad, I said, Dad, I'm at the mercy of if there is a special event that's taking place for the station. And my my family all understands that. It's what we do for a living. So I want to thank the Indianapolis Colts for making that decision easy for me. Because I'm going to go on December 22nd and do what's important and be around my family and be around the people that in my lifetime have held me accountable when I've made mistakes. But I'm going to be around the things right now that are important at the holidays. And thank you for making that decision for me, because that game Sunday is completely irrelevant. I know that mathematically they still got a chance. But if they can't take care of business when everybody knows it's there for them, then I can't help them. That was a pitiful, pathetic, immature, childish, lack of accountability from top to bottom performance. And if I'm Jim Irsay, I'm looking at it and I'm starting at the very top and saying, I'm going to start you know what I did yesterday? When that game was on, I went to my closet and I cleaned out a third of my wardrobe and took a bunch of winter clothing that I don't wear anymore so that I could take it, and I cleaned things out. I cleaned house is what I did. Literally, what I did yesterday is I cleaned house. I was a day ahead of the Colts. That was pathetic.
Yeah, look, we've been kind of saying something along the lines of this conversation for the better part of the last 3 years. It doesn't get any better underneath Chris Ballard. The one constant about this team's ineptness the last 3, 4, 5 seasons post Andrew Luck has been his inability to put together a consistent roster. Sure, he'll win every now and again at a position group. He'll find a diamond in the rough. Maybe once every 3 or 4 seasons, he'll make a big trade, and you'll get DeForest Buckner, or you'll get somebody that can stave off the fan base for a bit and give you false hope and false expectations. But this is my biggest concern last year. Even if you're right about Anthony Richardson, is Chris Ballard competent enough as a general manager to be able to build around him and take them to the heights they want to go? And time again, he, his personnel, and everyone below him answer the question with a resounding no. They are not capable of putting together a team worthy of viewership, worried of attendance, and worthy of being amongst even playoff teams, let alone the best that the AFC has to offer. It's not just that they were inept and committed malpractice on multiple levels yesterday and made head-scratching, boneheaded mistakes. The fumble by Jonathan Taylor, I thought we were done with this in the modern NFL. I really did. I thought the whole, I'm going to get cute and let the ball slip out of my hands, a brief window as I'm right there at the goal. I thought we were done. Apparently not. It happened like twice this weekend. That was the more consequential of the two, but that's back in vogue, I guess, in the National Football League. And look, I know Jonathan Taylor is killing himself in the locker room scrum. Like, I get it, but he's right. It can't happen. And I'm not going to sit here and give you a pass as a veteran.
Was
he killing
himself, really? I didn't hear that.
The way that he...
In what way was he killing himself in the locker room scrum?
I mean, did you watch the press conference?
Yeah, he's like, yeah. I mean, it'll never happen again. It'll never happen again. Okay.
I think he knows and is deflecting and internalizing how bad he messed up yesterday. I'm not justifying that it happened. I'm to your point that when you pay him all that money, when you sit out and you demand to be paid like a franchise back, that doesn't happen anymore in the modern NFL because teams aren't allocating those type of dollars there. When you sit around and you waste an offseason of people's time holding out for more money, you're right, it can't happen. It's inexcusable and it's unacceptable. And the only reason that it gets slightly lost in the shuffle is because I thought the era of really bad trick plays for this franchise was never going to be one-upped based on the play that you and Derek Schultz continue to put on a loop for people, which is the Chuck Pagano play.
It's the greatest play in the history of the National Football League.
It is. And it will forever live in infamy because of that.
The fake punt against the Patriots.
Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. A.D. Mitchell. Eddie, can we play the bite? Do you have that? A.D. Mitchell telling the media what he saw happen yesterday. I want to play this for a second.
It said if it's not there, throw it away. So if you kind of look from my perspective, it was there. Pretty much until 15 just turned to Ed Reed and just came through out of nowhere. So, I mean, it was a great play by him, so we just got to execute it better.
Look, Nick Bonito's a great player. We talked about him all last week that he was going to make a play at some point to change this game, and he did. I don't know what A.D. Mitchell's talking about. If he makes a clean catch of the ball and then does the double pass, maybe it's there. He double clutches the football. Eddie and I talked about this off the air. Maybe he was trying to get the laces the right way before he made the throw. Once he does that, it's not there anymore.
Jimmy, when he says...
What do you mean you executed the play?
Let me play for you the first thing he says there, Eddie. Play this again. I'll tell you when to stop it. Go ahead, play it again.
It said if it's not there, throw it away.
Boom, stop it. Throw it away. I'll tell you what a throwaway is. A throw it away was earlier in the game. He should know what a throwaway is because the only time the entire game that Anthony Richardson threw the football to A.D. Mitchell was on a play where he was throwing it away. Because A.D. Mitchell was standing on the sidelines where naturally any second-round wide receiver is during critical moments in critical games. And A.D. Mitchell was standing on the sidelines during a play when Anthony Richardson got flushed in the first half and threw it away. He intentionally threw it on the sidelines. Now, don't get me wrong. You have to make the disclaimer. When Anthony Richardson throws the ball 9 feet over someone's head, there are times where that's intentional. Now, not all, but there are times where that's intentional. On this play, Anthony Richardson threw it away because he was getting rushed, and he threw it into the stone hands of A.D. Mitchell, okay? So A.D. Mitchell should know what a throw it away is. He didn't throw it away. He was trying to throw it right back to – he was playing hot potato. Throw it away means throw it away. Not he was trying to complete a pass back to Anthony Richardson.
It's 4 seconds from the time he catches the ball, bobbles it, gets the laces right, takes 2 steps back, looking left the entire time to make that throw. It is 4 real seconds. That's not an over-exaggeration. That's not me underselling it. It is 4 beats for you to look to your left and decide, is that open? And even if you're going through after the fact with the gift of hindsight, a flow chart of what Shane Steichen said, is it open? No. Then it goes to throw it away. If the option is it open? Yes. Put some zip on the ball and get it there. And I've watched this thing 30 times at least since we've been in here to start the day. Maybe the all 22 is going to reveal some missing link to this that I just can't see. I tried to view it from A.D. Mitchell's perspective. He said, if you look at it from my perspective, it's there. It's not there.
It was.
It's not there.
It was. I'm looking at the all-22 right now. Bernard Ryman's blocking Benito, and then Benito gets off the block as
So it's a good throw. It was
AD releases the ball and
just
he
to make
jumps
sure you're in the camp of he should have thrown that ball.
He
executed the play in your mind. He should have thrown that football.
I'm saying he did what he was told to do.
Okay.
I do not put this play on AD at all. Maybe like 5%, but 95%. 95% of this is on Shane Steichen from my perspective.
I put the play,
it's a bad play call for sure.
I put it on this. This is the story of the 2024 Indianapolis Colts. You guys just did it in a complete microcosm. You just illustrated perfectly what's wrong with the Indianapolis Colts in 2024. What was just done on this radio station was perfectly summarizing the problem with the Indianapolis Colts. Perfectly. Which I will further explain in just a minute. After I explain to you folks, by the way, that if you have a monthly car wash program in your car and you're going to Jiffy Lube between now and the end of the year, so you got like 16 days left? You go in to get a signature service, oil change. You're going to get $20 off and a free tire rotation simply by pointing out to the Jiffy Lube team member when you pull in that you are a member of any monthly car wash program. You got that sticker in the window or right there on the license plate, no problem. Point it out. There's the savings for you at Jiffy Lube, your one-stop shopping for all your vehicle maintenance needs where you do not need an appointment. But those two guys just perfectly illustrated the Indianapolis Colts problems in 2024. And I'll explain what I mean by that, and we'll continue to do a deep dive on a day when Mike Chappell going to join us 1 o'clock. Don Fischer at 1:30. We got Hoosiers football and basketball to talk about, and we will probably give you folks a platform as well, because I know that a lot of people want to vent their frustrations on this, what feels like a throwaway day for the Colts in terms of their season. We'll get to it.
We sucked. The second half, we sucked.
So there were so many moments yesterday that personified the Colts. And as I always say, and I realize that they still mathematically are alive for a playoff berth, but for all intent and purposes, yesterday was the end of their season. And I have always felt that more often than not, yeah, there are times where a team gets bounced out of the NCAA tournament or something happens where it just nothing goes their way, and you're like, it just wasn't their day, you know? I mean, like, I look at I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to give, I guess, specific examples because there's no point to that. But more often than not, I mean, yes, anomalies happen, but more often than not, when a team's season comes to an end, the things that bite them are a microcosm of what was biting them all year long. And that play, as I talked about, the Jonathan Taylor drop, and then afterwards from Shane Steichen, zero accountability, to me speaks volumes. I mean, Steichen didn't even say, like, listen, that's something we're going to have to talk about. It's, you know, look, he's one of our leaders, and, you know, that stuff happens. That stuff happens? Okay. Sure, it does. I mean, there are any play in the NFL for the most part has happened before, but it doesn't mean that, like, you just dish it off as part of the game. And then the A.D. Mitchell play where, you know, you're going to a guy that hasn't literally, if A.D. Mitchell delivers for you and you get a big play on that play, that's like the first time the guy's delivered for you all year for the most part in a big moment. And when we were just discussing that play, you just saw the 2024 Colts summarized perfectly. Because Eddie is saying, look, it's actually the fault not of A.D. Mitchell, but of circumstance, and notably Ryman, who surrenders his block at that point. And you can't blame A.D. Mitchell because he's the one throwing the ball. So at the very least, if there's blame, it would be to Shane Steichen. But it was kind of a weird confluence of event. Jimmy is saying, no, you have to blame A.D. Mitchell because he sat back, he spun the ball around, he rented Ace Ventura to make sure that laces do go out. Then he sat for another second, read the wind, pointed the direction he was throwing, and then threw it. I was saying A.D. Mitchell is also to blame because he was saying that he was told to throw the ball away, and instead of throwing the ball away, he tries to throw it right back to where it came from instead of just aborting the play altogether. My point being this. And all of that conversation and all of these bouncing around of all these names that we're pointing at, in actuality, there's no accountability because we don't even know who to be held accountable. And that's the problem with the 2024 Indianapolis Colts. There has never been accountability. Who's accountable? I guess Anthony Richardson was the one player that they held accountable because they benched him because they didn't like the way that he was showing up for work. Until like 2 games later, theoretically, somebody above whoever made that decision came and said, no, we're not going to do it that way. We're going to put him back out there. And so they did. This roster is flawed. There's nobody to hold accountable the guy that's putting that together. I mean, Chris Ballard now is, 60, 68-1? And all we've heard about, Chris Ballard is the Andrew Luck of general managers. When Andrew Luck came into the league, everybody, oh, he's just special. What makes him special? He's great. What makes him great? He's got it. What does he have? Special. But I know he looks the part. He's big. He's got a big arm. And Luck obviously had great, I mean, I think he was a great
Luck
player.
Luck actually achieved something of substance. Ballard's yet to do that, but your point remains. I get the parallel.
But my point being, when Ballard came in, all we heard about was this guy is the rest of the league. I mean, if you were to ask any organization, this is the GM they'd take. Why? Because he just has an it factor. What's the it factor? He just, they really believe in his promise. He's young. And like, how long is a guy young and up and coming?
Agents around the league love him. He always gets that award.
He looks young because he's got the flat brim hat. I'll give him that, right?
It takes all 5 years.
But I just think that, Ballard, at some point, I mean, are we back to square one now? Because next year you're starting over again, basically. Yeah, you're going to bring Richardson back, but who are his primary targets? What Ballard is, here's where Chris Ballard is a genius. Just an absolute genius. Chris Ballard has made the Colts the greatest Netflix show ever. Because every season ends with a cliffhanger that makes you longing for the next one. Just when you think you've seen it all, something happens and you're like, oh my gosh, I thought we were going to get answers this season, but season 9 is going to be awesome. I mean, season 8 ended a lot like season 7, and it really felt like season 4. But season 9, this is the year where like all the cliffhangers are all going to be answered. He just keeps kicking the can down the road. Hey, Chris, I know you got the, franchise quarterback and stuff, and Anthony reminds me kind of like a Dylan, like when you get the band and everybody and, it sounds good. Well, yeah, I'm aware of Mr. Irsay, but as soon as I get a tight end for him, then that's going to be the big piece. Well, I know last year, like I thought, like you said, AD was going to be a good player and stuff, Well, as soon as he learns how to throw the ball away. I mean, it literally is just, he is the master. Chris Ballard is the master at getting himself extended in terms of the rope, because he always leaves that one thing that's like, well, but if they had that, until you realize, wait a minute, the guy in charge of getting it is him.
It's smoke and mirrors. It's deflection. It is wizardry at the highest order. It is brilliant in a way. If it wasn't, setting the franchise back years on years on years every time a new issue pops up and he has to be the witch doctor to try to, air quotes, fix it.
We'll do a little cathartic discussion here. John, what's up?
Hey, guys. Great show.
Thank you.
Okay, Jay, I got 3 things real quick. Number 1, we got to clean this up. Okay? We got some cleaning to do. Number 2, I think Ballard and Richardson obviously need to go. I do like Steichen. But number 3, what would you do if Jim Irsay said, I want your sound advice? What would you do, Jay?
In terms of the direction of the franchise?
Yes.
I would make a change at the person who is making personnel decisions.
Well, I think Ballard knows he's gone because of the way that AR has just there's nothing, like you said. You made such a great point. What's so good about him? He's special. What's so special about him? He's good. He's got it. And I'm like, I haven't even seen him play any football.
Well, here's the thing. I do think, John, that Richardson does give you intrigue. I mean, there are times, to be honest with you, and the problem is this, John. The problem is in today's NFL with the size, speed, and aggressiveness of defenses, it's just you're playing with fire and trying to do an offense where the quarterback is on the ground all the time, because it does not have sustainability from a health standpoint. But when you saw the way they were able to move the ball in doing basically a college type offense, they are effective. It's when he has to throw the ball. And in today's NFL, eventually you've got to throw the ball, and you cannot have a quarterback that's completing at 47%. Now, I do think that Richardson is still very raw. My point being, if you were going to draft a raw quarterback like an Anthony Richardson, then you had to have a game plan in place to be able to groom him along in ways that were giving him the best supporting cast. And it is my opinion now, through year 2 heading into year 3 of him, that he has not been given that same supporting cast. And the guy making those decisions in Chris Ballard, to me, I don't know Chris Ballard as a man. My understanding is he is a decent human being and in a good part of the community. I'm not saying any of this is a personal attack. I'm saying in terms of his job execution, the reality is that it feels very rinse and repeat, and that he is the master at creating his own fires and then expecting he's like the firefighter that has the arson syndrome. He creates an arson and then expects praise for being the firefighter that was first on the scene. And that, to me, is troublesome.
2 things.
He's got to clean it up, right? We're going to clean it up.
And number 2?
That's right. Now's the time at 239-1070 if you would like to get it off your mind about the Colts.
Can I put one request out there for Colts fans as well? Because John, I wanted to ask him this, but we obviously let him go. Do Colts fans really think they're getting rid of Chris Ballard? Like, legitimately, I'm in agreement they should. I've been saying it. Jake's been saying it for years. But, like, my analogy's been, in the horror movie, you're waiting for Michael Myers to see the dead body. I'll believe it when I see it with Chris Ballard's tenure being over here. Like, what out of the standard the Colts have set for themselves would give you any indication they're actually going to make that change? I don't have it. Like, I still don't have it today after that debacle. So I would like that from Colts fans as well if you legitimately think they're going to get rid of him. Not you think they should. You actually think they're going to do it. Because I don't.
There are other areas, by the way, where they can clean things up, to John's point, and we'll get to that as well. But 239-1070, the shout line is open. Answering the question objectively and factually based, it would be my opinion, and I think somebody said it to me best, when you make a change in personnel. I'm not saying that Chris Ballard is a bad person. I'm saying that at this point, I'm not convinced that he's the best person for the job that he holds. And he himself had said at the beginning of the year, if it doesn't work out, you can fire me over it. And I would say, you know what, Chris, nothing personal, it's just business. But at this point, and if they had been completely decimated by injury, I would get it. But Anthony Richardson's been healthy. There is no doubt that he shows signs of promise, but it's always one step forward and then a step and a half back. The areas that he probably most could use the assistance in allowing his growth have not been addressed, in my opinion. Additional receiver threat. I mean, Josh Downs is a good player for him, but the tight end position is one that everybody and their brother was jumping up and down saying, you've got to go out and get a tight end. Look, we got 6 guys in that room that, I mean, we got guys. We like our guys. I mean, they're all good football players. Okay. I mean, fine. But we're right back to square one here, right? And I have said myself, and I will admit the hypocrisy here, that I thought that if you were trying to go with a running game in the 2024 National Football League, that's not going to be what carries you. But unless you have a quarterback that's throwing sub 50% and has athleticism. And they were able to move the football yesterday when they were running kind of that almost a borderline, like a wishbone type look, the RPO stuff with Taylor in the backfield. But you can't rely on that. That's just too dangerous a recipe. I just don't think they have built depth and built pieces and addressed them in the areas that were not a mystery at all. Terry's been waiting patiently. Hi, Terry. How are you?
I'm fine. Yourself?
Doing fine, thank you.
We're both frustrated. I know that.
I would agree. I mean, I can't speak for you, but yeah, I mean, again, Terry, I'm going to go back to, it's like my parents when I was in school. I'm not frustrated. I'm disappointed. I'm just disappointed because we were told not to worry about it, and here we are. But anyway, your thoughts.
It's like you said at the beginning. I think as a fan, we get more excited and into this than the players. And until they get as excited as we do, I don't know if we'll ever do any good. But two comments. One, about our draft choice last spring. I think 90% of fandom out there wanted us to pick a tight end or a wide receiver. Brock Bauer went one spot ahead of us to Vegas. He's made 87 catches already this year. Think what he could have done for us, but Ballard didn't see fit to go after him. Second thing about Ballard, if losing last night helps us to get rid of Chris Ballard, it will be well worth it.
Okay, good point. Now, Terry, I will say this. To be fair, while we don't know definitively that they did not go after Brock Bowers, all accounts are that they did, in fact, look at moving up in the draft. So that, to be fair,
we saw it in the
point.
Giants, offseason Hard Knocks.
Tyler, what's up?
How you guys doing this afternoon?
Good.
Good. I just wanted to make a point. You guys talking about Ballard, and I fully agree with all of that. I'm just thinking the play calling from Shane Steichen has been questionable, especially in losses to Houston, Jacksonville, even in Minnesota. I feel like anytime we let the opposing team score a point, he gets too cute. And
Bingo.
Our offense in that third quarter, we're starting to get in a rhythm. I think that was the third or fourth possession. And he decides to run a trick play with a rookie trying to throw the ball back. But why are we doing that?
I think too cute, Tyler, is dead on. I think sometimes a guy like Steichen is he hurts himself because, yes, he's this offensive guru, right? And he's this mad scientist in the lab. And there are some plays that are a yard away from either being genius or disaster, okay? But in that situation, and A.D. Mitchell, I mean, what possible move has A.D. Mitchell made this year to give you belief that he was going to make the right play and the right decision there? John, you're up.
Thanks for taking my call. So I have just two things, I think, mostly, is last night on the Green Bay game, they talked about Gutekunst, and full disclosure, I'm a Green Bay and a Colts fan. I grew up there. We went to the Colts-Green Bay game. Love both teams. They said, how great of a GM is he and the ones before him to pick, to get Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers, and now Jordan Love. I just don't see that in our GM. Would you agree with that? The talent picks, the wide receivers, there's not a need on the Packers for next year, whereas there's a lot of needs on the Colts.
I think that's the thing, John. Look, I would imagine that building a roster is a challenge because there are always going to be areas of need. And then you ask yourself, do you just try to piecemeal a bunch of positions at once? Do you load up one position one year, one position the next year? There's a lot that goes into it. The quarterback position certainly feels like for the Colts they kicked the can as far as they could. It wasn't raining when Noah built the ark. They didn't seem to have much of a game plan until finally they were backed into a corner, and it was like, we got to do something. So they go out and they get Richardson. And then you get a quarterback. You put yourself in position where the quarterback you got, you have no game plan as to what the future is, and in having the pieces with him to build it, right, and to give it time. Ballard, I have always felt, was brilliant in this regard. And I'm not saying this was by design. I'm not saying it wasn't. But this was brilliant. I'm the general manager of the Indianapolis Colts, and I have Andrew Luck. I mean, I just walked myself into the most desired position in the National Football League because every GM wants to have Andrew Luck as the key that is running their engine. And I walked into it. Now, certainly in Ballard's case, we'll give him a pass, if you will, on the injuries that did in Andrew Luck, and he did not get Andrew Luck at full Andrew Luck bore. Fine. If I'm Chris Ballard at that point, the day that Andrew Luck retired, I still remember where I was. I was calling the race in St. Louis at Gateway International Raceway, or whatever they call it these days, and I'm up there, and all of a sudden, I get everybody in the place is looking at their phone because it's mostly Indianapolis people that are there, and everybody's going, Andrew Luck just retired. And it was that preseason game. If Chris Ballard was standing next to me right then, what I would have expected is that he would have walked down underneath that grandstand and done backflips all the way under the arch back to Indianapolis. Because if I'm Chris Ballard right then, I'm saying to myself, if I play my cards right, I just bought myself at least a half a decade. Because if I have Andrew Luck and we don't win in 3 years, I'm out. But this is brilliant. Holy cow, what a godsend I just got. Andrew Luck just retired on me, so I'll put Jacoby Brissett in there, and I look like a genius because I acquired Jacoby Brissett. And then we'll just kind of maintain course with Jacoby Brissett. And I'll go out, and somewhere, somehow, some way at the last minute, there has to be like a veteran quarterback that's out there and I can get him. Phillip Rivers. All right, great. I'll get Phillip Rivers and we'll go to the playoffs. And we might get beat in the playoffs, and it'll be cool because at least I can say I've been to the playoffs. But we might get beat in the playoffs, but I can tell people, yeah, but I had an aging quarterback. And I thought I could get 2 years out of him, but I just got the one. But that's okay because I was able to go to my owner, Chris, man, I know Andrew, I gave him that money and I don't know if he's coming back, but what are we thinking, Well, boss man, look, this was tough because I wasn't anticipating this. So I don't like the quarterbacks in this year's class. So I'm going to get another veteran out there somewhere and then we'll revisit. Is that cool? Yeah, I get it. You got to know when you draft and, you draft high and stuff. And so it's cool, and then we just revisit it in a year. Okay, sounds good. So he goes out, and then eventually gets Carson Wentz, and it looked like that might have been the guy that was going to be a 3 to 4 year guy, but Irsay didn't like Wentz, so he comes back. Chris, how are we looking at the quarterback? Well, Jim, you told me that you didn't like Carson Wentz, and that was the guy that I really thought was going to be a good player, but I understand that there were a lot of variables like the COVID and stuff that nobody anticipated. So I don't like the quarterbacks in this year's draft, so I'll go out and get us a veteron.
Wentz also wasn't good, by the way. Just to
what's that?
Wentz also was not good, by the way.
He was for the first half of the year.
Yeah,
he was okay.
We'll always have those 8 games, and then the rest of his career is what it is—a perennial backup.
And so
I mean to undercut the Jim Irsay back and forth. I apologize,
so then he says he buys himself more time, right?
Yeah,
and he goes out and he gets Matt Ryan, right? We have Matt Ryan. Okay, great. So you got Matt Ryan. I thought, to be honest with you, I thought he's going to be on TV and stuff. No, because he's still got some juice left in the tank, so we're going to get him here. And then I don't like the quarterbacks in this draft. So if you can just give me another year or two. So then the Matt Ryan thing implodes, and they try out Sam Ehlinger, and then before you know it, it's not Matt Ryan on TV, but rather that's where Jim Irsay's scouting out for coaches, and he's bringing in Saturday, and you got all this mayhem and just disruption going on all around. And so Ballard goes to him and says, hey, boss man. So I realized, but here's the thing. This year, I'm going to draft a quarterback. The one guy likes the mayonnaise, and I don't really like mayonnaise, but just let me know which. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. I'm going to come up. I like this Anthony Richardson from Florida, and I understand it. I mean, there was a lot about Richardson that was intriguing to people throughout the process, and I think it would be premature at this point to completely throw in that towel. But it's brilliant. Because even with this year, with the Colts imploding, theoretically, Ballard should be able to go back to Irsay and say, but I told you, and you knew that when we drafted him, this was going to be a 3 to 4 year process. Except for if it's a 3 to 4 year process and the Colts fell short this year because of they got everything they could out of themselves except for just experience and maturity was the thing holding them back, you could live with that. But it's not. It's a 3 to 4 year process, but in year number 2 now, you are held back and you are again probably going to miss the playoffs because of things that are the things that you should be able to control. Your team has no accountability. Your team has no discipline. Your team gets too creative and outthinks itself offensively. You have no weapons for him to be a safety net to allow for his growth. And the guy that you claim is by your coach's admission, is your star that is supposed to be able to set tone and example according to you. Your stars are the ones that set the culture of your team, but your star makes the biggest boneheaded play of all, and then your coach says those things happen, which means accountability, non-existent. You are the guy that decided who's going to coach. You are the guy that decided what the direction is going to be and where the accountability is, and I, as the owner, don't see any of it. Those are the reasons why, to me, it would seem the time is now to make that change. But to your point, Jimmy,
I got to see the body, Jake.
Richardson and Ballard are also, when you see the body of Ballard, and you're going to say, we need a double wide on the blanket because there's another one attached at the hip. Because theoretically, when a general manager drafts a franchise quarterback, they are attached at the hip. And that becomes a complicated situation. Mike Chappell is not complicated, and he joins us next. Good news. The Pacers looked good yesterday.
Back-to-back wins. Nice. First time in a month, Jake.
Indiana looked good at Nebraska. Oh. Yeah. Purdue with a solid. Yeah, okay. Although Purdue, Texas A&M is a little more.
Yeah, it's a reasonable loss.
Yeah.
Neutral court, good team.
Buzz Williams lost some weight, right?
Yeah. Looked good.
He looks kind of like Ted Cruz now. It's like.
Someone told Buzz.
Environment there was at Gainbridge Fieldhouse was pretty nice. Pretty good.
Did you go?
I did. We did.
Both games?
I stayed for the half of the Butler game.
How about this fun fact as we bring on Mike Chappell? Yesterday, because of my weird nuance and the way my brain works, you guys may have seen my tweet on this, but yesterday was the 9,171st day of existence since the opening of Gainbridge Fieldhouse.
I did see
it
your
has now
tweet.
been open for 9,171
That deserves more than one. That's at least
days.
5.
Now, that's significant only because from the day that it opened to the day that it closed, Market Square Arena lasted 9,170 days. Thus, Gainbridge Fieldhouse is now officially 2 days older than the lifespan of Market Square Arena.
There's a world where I imagine inside Jake's apartment, him and Boo making 9,000 tally marks on a wall, counting down the days to send that tweet out.
Boo actually is the one tallying those things, believe you me, right? How long have I been here again? Joining us now, and I'm sure thrilled to be doing so, on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line, he is our friend from CBS4 and WXIN Fox 59. Mike Chappell joins us. Chap, I'll get right to the big question at hand, and that is, I felt like, and you tell me if I'm being too critical, too knee-jerk, too in the moment. The Jonathan Taylor play is one that afterwards when Shane Steichen said, look, he's one of our leaders and those things happen, even if you think that and even if it's accurate, you have to at least display that there's going to be some sort of accountability for a play that even though you don't put the season into a play, you can in that situation. It was a disaster, and that was the beginning of the end, and to me that personifies exactly what's wrong with this franchise, but I want you to tell me if I'm being too critical.
No, but I don't know what the accountability is for being a bonehead play. Bench him. That seems extreme for one play. Although,
but what about just simply saying, hey, that's a play that we cannot have, and I'm going to talk to him about that, and we will certainly work through that, but he needs to know that that is absolutely inexcusable.
I think he could have been, Shane Steichen could have been more assertive after the game. He said it hurt a lot, and then that's kind of where it stopped. I think that's one that after the game or today you say, man, what were you thinking? Which he obviously wasn't. It's funny. I was watching games yesterday, and a Bengals was it a DB?
Yeah,
had a scoop and score, and he did the same damn thing. Although he was trying to change hands for whatever reason. So live long enough and these things happen. But yeah, yes, there should be a sit down to some. I don't care if it's 10 seconds to say. That did change the course of the season. I don't care all the rationale. It's 20-7, early third, and your defense is just kicking the crap out of Denver.
And you know what, Mike? Real quick, I want to tip the cap here because we're an hour into it, and I failed to do this, and I apologize to the listeners for this. Gus Bradley's been a whooping boy all year, and yesterday that defense was up for the challenge, and kudos to them for that. It's too bad that the offense was completely inept and couldn't help them out.
Yeah, and that's what I said. I don't see any reason to think, Denver would have gotten more desperate and then they would have, mounted a comeback. No, this is one where the defense had the day. I think I went back and looked, and I get, as I've said, I get preoccupied with stats. But I think that's the first time since like 2007, I think, that they've lost a game giving up less than 200 yards. You don't lose those games because when your defense is doing that, all the offense has to do is stay out of its own way. 5 turnovers. That's the most turnovers since the infamous meltdown in Dallas in 22 where they gave up like a zillion points in the fourth quarter. But, yeah, that's why I say they're going to say, and you always hear coaches say, well, the game's more than one play or two plays. No, it's not. it's normal. It's normally 5 or 6 plays that you make, they make, and whoever does the best in those plays wins. 20 to 7. I was trying to think of the last time one play swung a game so incredibly, and the only thing that sticks in my head, and I hate to bring up a bad name on a Monday, but Hank Baskett not covering the onside kick against Sean Payton in the Super Bowl in 2009, where the Colts were ahead, and I'm convinced with a short field, Payton takes them down and scores, and then they win by double digits. There's probably another play, but that one play, it just did everything to you. And then it's compounded by the double pass, which, yes, it's aggressive. I understand. And I saw Dan Orlovsky had a great, thing where he showed how if it worked, Richardson had the whole left side of the field to go and run. It would have scored. But my problem is they put one of the components was a throw to A.D. Mitchell, who, in all honesty, has not done a whole lot to gain your trust this year. So I don't care if he's completed one or that 5 times in college or whatever. I just thought that was too risky given the personnel you were using. And then the Bronco guy, makes a great play, and all of a sudden he's a great highlight. But yeah, it's one play, and for Taylor to do that, I don't know why players. You're not going to run and then hand it to the official because players, they keep footballs. Marvin Harrison always did that, kept the football, but complete the play. And the fact that it will never happen with him again, it won't. They'll have to pry the football out of his hands. But it did happen, and instead of being in almost total control of your playoff push, almost total control, you've got now it's one of these where I think the thing that really has to happen is the Chargers need to lose 2 out of 3, I think.
Yeah.
But and that's just they've got an easier schedule. They got not a bad schedule. I think KC's a game, and they may be sitting Mahomes. So to have one play, determine a playoff possibility against, at best, a 9-8 season, and what did you accomplish, and how might the trickle down be? I'm sorry, I'm going to be that guy that one play did so much damage, and it's from your best offensive player, and then Michael Pittman drops a ball or fumbles a ball. Got hit pretty good, but, guys get hit. So to have your best players not come through when you have to was really damning.
Mike, do you believe that if the Colts fail to make the playoffs this year, which is still not mathematically, to your point, they're still mathematically alive?
About 10%.
Okay, if they miss the play, we said going into the year, this year was all about the development of Anthony Richardson. Anything above that was gravy. So I'm not trying to move the goalposts. But if, considering they had it within grasp and it was their own areas that have been afflicting them all year that held them back, if the Colts fail to make the playoffs this year, do you believe that Jim Irsay will take a hard look at who is running the franchise?
Yes, I think he has to. Having said that, I know how much he believes in Chris Ballard. I know how much he believes in Shane Steichen. Remember the Don Shula comparison,
yep,
which was, over the top by, leaps and bounds. But I just don't know that 9-8, if they, I guess, why should I believe they can beat 3 crappy teams that finish the season? But I don't know that 9-8 is going to be much of a consolation. Well, we had a winning season. Well, yeah, but so will he make a move? I don't know. I won't be surprised. But if you make a move with the GM, I mean, you blow it up completely. How do you bring in a new GM and say, by the way, this is your head coach and this is your quarterback? The GM may say, maybe not. So it's one of those, to me, if you're going to make a move, you just totally take a flamethrower to it, and that's obviously dramatic. It's asking the fan base, hey, listen, trust us. In 2 or 3 years, we're going to be pretty good. Well, you've been telling us to be patient for the last 4 or 5 years. So, but no, what you're saying is he has to. It just can't be that you have, unwavering faith in what's in place, because this is where you are. And again, 9-8 is not a consolation. It's not. In 5 years, you're going to say, they had back-to-back 9-8 seasons, almost made the playoffs, but didn't. With all that's gone into it, the owner has got. Now, I'm not saying you take a hard look and then you make the change, but you take a hard look and you have to determine if you stick with the guys you have. You can't just do the same. It's the old insanity definition, doing the same thing and expecting different results. So if you stay the course, there has to be changes. But the major problem is, and I've said all along, this year was all about developing Richardson to the point that at the end of the season, you know what you have. I still don't know what they have.
Correct. Do you think they know?
I really don't. He threw for 70 yards in the first 3 quarters.
But Chap, do you think that they feel like they have a firm idea of what they have?
No, I don't know how they can. You cannot compete in this league throwing 50%. I think he's had 50% or less in 8 of his 14 starts. And hey, the long passes and the explosive plays are great, but he's still missing guys. There was one he threw to the left to Josh Downs. I don't think it would have gained much, but he airmails it over his head. The one to Pittman that Pittman probably should have caught, but it was low. You just can't. Let's go back to when Carson Wentz didn't make the layups. Remember, and Richardson still isn't making the layups. And hey, what he brings as a runner is fantastic. It really is. But he's quarterback. He still has to make plays from the pocket with his arm. And I'm talking about every game you see these guys hitting slants and checkdowns and bubble screens. And these guys really don't do that much. And whether that's, I don't know how harsh to be on Shane Steichen, because when you don't have a quarterback who allows you to have 2nd and 6, 2nd and 3, because you've made that easy completion, it's hard. And then you've got the offensive line. Danny Pinner blew up two drives when the game was still there, with holding penalties and all that. So it's hard. So there's going to be some serious soul searching. There has to be. Injuries have hurt him, no question, on the offensive line. But with Richardson, I don't know what we've seen as development as a passer. I've not seen it. Maybe he's even regressed a little bit as a passer. And that's been blinded early by the explosive plays. But boy, you've got to be able to move chains with easier throws and with simpler throws, and they haven't done it. And if this is where they are at the end of the season, I don't know what you do. How do you go into 2025 and say, this is our guy, no question? Do you bring in a veteran to challenge him, which is only going to maybe retard his development, which maybe that's what it needs? I don't know. Maybe he's not the guy. Sam Darnold, I mean, are we going to go down that path again? I don't know. They won't be in position to draft a guy. If you want to draft a guy in the 2nd round to develop, okay. But I just haven't seen what I'd hoped to see from Richardson as far as throwing the freaking football, because he's a quarterback. And yes, we got blinded by Peyton Manning completing 70%. It's totally different, but you still have to complete 60%. I don't know what bar we should have him at, what the floor is, but 35, 40, 50% is not cutting it. And I think he's thrown for 200 yards like 4 times, 5 times. So it's just placing too much pressure on the run game and on a defense that it's not a great defense by any stretch. But you get that kind of a game from the defense, and if you don't win, it's on the offense, and the special teams screwed up, obviously. But I just don't know where they are with the quarterback. And until you get the quarterback right, what else matters? So that's going to be a monster. Talk about the GM all you want and the head coach all you want. If you don't know what you got at quarterback, then you've got nothing. You've just got nothing. And right now, I just don't know I don't know how they can sit there and say, yeah, we know what we got. If they know what they got, they know they haven't got enough. That's the only thing I could guess is because they've got 14 games of evidence and we just haven't seen consistent efficiency from the pass game, not the run game. What he brings in the run game is really, really impressive and threatening. But, boy, you got to do more in the pass game. He had a couple of great throws early, those early conversions. But they need more than the splash plays. They need the easier plays, and they just haven't been there all season.
The Dean Mike Chappell of Fox 59 and CBS 4 joins us on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line. Chap, you outline a lot to Jake's question regarding do they look at making a change and how they could evaluate that and then maybe come back to the table and say, well, it's not enough there for us to fully revamp, or maybe they're afraid of looking for the next quarterback or starting over or all the things that you outlined. At what point, though, when you're evaluating the last 8 seasons, 9 seasons, do you look at the one constant that has continued to not be elite enough to fix their shortcomings? And that has been Chris Ballard. I mean, if you told yourself a decade ago that the Colts were going to go 10 years without winning the South, like let alone doing anything of substance in the playoff, just winning that division, you would have told the person that they were nuts. And I'm with you. There's a lot of fear about that unknown again. Would a new general manager keep Anthony Richardson? Do you remove Shane Steichen and let the new GM, whoever it is, go and pick his own guy? Regardless of those answers, though, at what point do you look around during this evaluation when the season's over and not just look at this season, look at what the last 8 years have been, really look hard in the mirror and realize you haven't been close to anything, like anything of substance? At what point does that finally matter? Because I'm with you. There are serious issues if you move Ballard now because it creates a domino effect of, well, the quarterback might not be the guy for the general manager. The head coach might not be either. But that can't be enough to scare you off the plot, which is he hasn't been good enough at his job.
Oh, I think that's part of the discussion now. And I don't know that the last 3 games would change your evaluation unless this team just goes and tanks the last 3 games, which I don't think they'll do. They've got too many, tell me DeForest Buckner's going to tank the last 3 games. But I don't know what. Again,
but they're also against bad opponents, Chap. Like they should win those games.
That's what I mean. If they go in, let's say they go 1-2 against the schedule, I mean, maybe that would be enough to say, okay, we've got to reset. And again, in my mind, if there's a reset, it probably needs to be a major reset. It's hard if you offer a GM job to somebody or a head coaching job. Most guys will take it regardless of the baggage they get because there's only 32 of these in the league. But the idea of telling a GM, oh, by the way, you're going to have Shane Steichen, who the guy may be on board with, and you're going to have Anthony Richardson, who the guy may say, nah, I don't think so. That's the problem. If you're going to do it,
if they traded Anthony Richardson this offseason, would you fear 2025 with possible regret? Because I wouldn't right now. Like if they moved on with a new general manager going into September of 2025, I would not sit there thinking, man, I think they made a mistake.
Yeah, no, that's one where you'd say, boy, if in 2 years he's semi Lamar Jackson, you say, well, he had 2 years here. Well, he really had 1 year. Last year was a wash with the injury. So that's a major decision to make because this guy is a special talent. We'll put it that way, special talent, and he's played 20.
He's a special talent,
games.
Mike, but we don't know yet whether he's a special quarterback talent.
So that's no question. There's no question.
And in addition to that, if he's not, to me, I would summarize it simply as this. If I'm Jim Irsay and I'm calling in Chris Ballard, I am saying, listen, I know that we have all collectively put our eggs in the basket of this kid, but the reality is this. I don't feel like you've put enough eggs in other baskets for him. And so, therefore, I can't adequately assess where he is because you haven't put together the right supporting cast around him to allow me to adequately make decision on him. So I am therefore deciding that it's the best interest for someone else to be able to make those decisions.
Yeah, and those are arguments that I really have a hard time pushing back on. I thought this team, if the quarterback had played reasonable, the running game's fine. The receivers, there's no alpha, guy that you look across and say, man, we got to stop this guy. I think it's a decent group, not a great group. Michael Pittman is really good. You want more, of course. Tight ends are awful. Tight ends had their best game yesterday, and it was a low bar. Offensive line was pretty darn good until injury started, and we don't know Braden Smith's future. I think he's under contract through next year. Ryan Kelly's will be a free agent. You draft, you've got two young kids, which is good. So if the quarterback plays better, maybe they're good enough on offense. Maybe I think probably they would have been good enough on offense. But yeah, that's what I say. I've always said that I've always thought that it's worse to have a quarterback who you think is the guy than to not have the guy, because while you're trying to decide if this guy is the guy, your team's getting older. Quentin Nelson and Bernard Ryman's lesser, but the defense is getting older. Jonathan Taylor's getting older, so you're wasting years. Jacksonville wasted a couple of rosters on trying to get it right, and they still may be. So while you're trying to decide if Anthony Richardson's the right guy, everybody's getting older, and then you got to make tough decisions on older players. So it's all got yes, Chris Ballard has got to be evaluated. It still seems like that it's got to start with a quarterback. And do you believe this guy can be the guy? Yes, you hate to give up on him because maybe he is in 2 years. But at some point you say, well, it's a different thing, but Jerry Hughes didn't work here, and you got rid of him and you moved on. And then he was pretty good in Buffalo. But it was never going to work here. It's not the same. But at some point, and it's still early with Richardson, it really is 14 starts. I mean, that's not even a season over 2 seasons. So I don't know, but it just seems to me like, and I can be talked off of it, I guess. It just seems to me like that the first thing you've got to decide is the quarterback the right guy. And if he's not, then maybe you do just blow it all up.
Jap, how about this one? What if I told you, and I'm saying this 100% flippantly, okay? What if I told you the Colts' best tight end on their roster is ironically playing the position that is most need of tight end, and that their best tight end is actually Anthony Richardson?
Yeah. Well, their best tight end apparently was at the game might have been Dallas Clark.
Yeah.
Crying out loud.
Right.
And again, I was one of those that I thought training camp that this was a decent, not great, but a decent group, depth and all that. And I was wrong. I was flat wrong on that. So that's the one thing that's kind of hurt Steichen and play calling as well, is you can't trust tight ends, and he likes tight ends. So a lot of that stuff goes against the play caller and the OC. But still, it's not been nearly good enough, and I'm really curious what the ramifications will be in a month, almost regardless of these last 3 games, although, really not playing well the last 3 games would really, really probably force the owner's hands. But I just go back to that one play, and the ramifications that could come out of one play could be immense. And the what-if game. So I'm really curious to where this franchise goes, because right now it's going nowhere.
Mike Chappell, CBS 4, WXIN, Fox 59. On a side note that probably the audience won't know what I'm talking about, but one of my favorite events of the year, Mike, tomorrow night I'll be seeing you, right?
I hope so. I'm still getting back from back surgery, 2 weeks ago tomorrow. I had fusion surgery, so I'm sort of getting around slowly. But I hope that worst case, I'll Uber downtown and Uber home. I want to be there because we keep losing people, bud. We keep losing people every year, and I want to see the people that are still around because I cherish them.
Well, it's the for those that don't know, we do, and I'm just lucky to be a fly on the wall for it. But Robin Miller used to put together the Iria's holiday dinner for those that worked at the Indianapolis Star. I was nothing more than a grunt, but I'm grateful that he treated me as if I was an equivalent. And so I love going and just listening to you guys tell stories. And we'll be doing it tomorrow night. Mike, if you need a ride, you let me know. If you need a plate delivered, you let me know as well. But certainly text me if you need a ride. Happy to do it. So not
I hope
an
to
issue
be there.
there.
I hope to see you because it's an important date.
It is. It's great. Appreciate the time, Mike, and we'll talk to you. I will get in touch with you on that, as a matter of fact, because it is very special to me as well. There's good news. Since we're talking about the Colts, the good news is we got IU basketball to talk about. Yeah.
Good.
Well, but the Hoosiers are taking on Notre Dame in the college football playoff, and the guy that will be on the call for that and was on the call for Indiana's game against Nebraska, Don Fischer, joins us next. and walked into a store, and they had a T-shirt, and it had the helmet of all 12 of the college football playoff teams on it, and it said, "We're in." And I thought instinctively, well, that's an interesting T-shirt to be selling in Indianapolis. And then I thought, oh, wait a minute. It still hasn't hit me, Jimmy. It still has not hit me. I'm like, Indiana's in this, right? I mean, obviously Notre Dame is local as well, but the Hoosiers and Notre Dame this Friday. It's not the Friday that just passed. It's this coming Friday. I do know that. And then there's basketball to talk about as well. But joining us now on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest Line, he is the man that will be on not only the microphone for Inside Indiana Basketball with Mike Woodson tonight at 7 o'clock on this radio station, but also Curt Cignetti's Hoosiers football playoff game in South Bend on Friday. Don Fischer joins us. Don, I'll begin with the upside of things, which is the week is here and the excitement is here for this college football playoff. Have you been able to, I guess, kind of to parlay off what we were talking about last week, have you been able to sense whether it be an enthused energy with this football team for this game, or has Curt Cignetti done a good job of kind of reeling it in and saying, like, okay, the time now is to really get it laser focused? What's kind of the overall feel?
Well, there's no question. Curt Cignetti is a guy that has this system that he projects to every week that they play a football game, and the last couple of weeks getting ready for this matchup, I think for the most part that was pretty. I don't want to say it wasn't. They weren't as precise in getting ready for Notre Dame as they were just working on techniques and things like that. But this week it is laser focused, and that started on Sunday. So there's no doubt they're getting ready to play a football game on Friday night against the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, and I guarantee you they will be laser focused.
When you looked on over the course of the year, and I mean, every week seemingly a new thing is unearthed that makes Curt Cignetti where you just go, is this real? Because the guy just seems to have this it factor that is so special, right? But when you look at it, would you say that the strong suit has been, and maybe I've asked you this before, does he have an ability to really break down the X's and O's of the opposition and let his guys know what they're going to be facing? Or is it more so they just craft their own craft so meticulously that they're not worried about what the other team's doing because they are focused on their task at hand, if that makes sense what I'm asking?
Well, if you're a football coach, I guarantee you're going to know what the other team tries to do and what they're capable of, and you're going to hone your team situation into what your strengths are against whatever they're trying to pull off from an X and O perspective. So, no, it's a combination of things, Jake. It's the same thing every week. They are preparing for this football contest throughout the season. Not too high, not too low, physical, fast, relentless, all those kinds of terms that Coach Cignetti uses. But they're a very focused program. There's just no question about that. And he likes the fact that they don't get too prepared, or they don't do a lot of preparation leading up to a ball game until the week of the game. He likes that urgency factor involved in getting prepared for this contest. And I'm sure that they talked about it a little bit during that off week and the week after the Purdue ball game. And there's definitely things that they're working on besides getting ready for this matchup because of the portal and the signing date and all those kinds of things. But this week, it is definitely all on this Notre Dame football team and what they're trying to do against Notre Dame, how they will go out there and perform and try to take advantage of what they see as weaknesses in what Notre Dame does, and vice versa. So it's the same every week, Jake, and I don't know how to answer it any differently.
The Hall of Famer, voice of the Hoosiers, Don Fischer, with us on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest Line. Don, it's been an unprecedented, historic season. They've won close games. They've blown people out. They've done things that we've never seen IU football teams do, at least in quite some time. That said, going into this matchup, there's a wide range of outcomes or how this game could go. Is there any result on Friday that would surprise you? Like, is there anything that of what this team has been through would have you taken aback, be it a big win, a big loss, or somewhere in between?
The only thing that would take me back in a matchup like this, whether I don't care if it's Notre Dame or Oregon or whoever, is if Indiana goes out and makes a bunch of mistakes. If they turn the ball over, do things that are totally uncharacteristic out there, I would be stunned by that. I think they'll play a very tough physical football game. I think they'll be in this ball game. I think they're going to win this ball game. That's just how I look at it. I watch this guy get his teams prepared week in and week out throughout this football season. I have yet to see them come into a ball game and make a ton of mistakes outside of the Ohio State game. And the two mistakes made in that game, I think, were a huge difference in how the outcome took place. And I do believe that the one thing that Coach Cignetti has talked about this week in prepping for this Notre Dame game is the fact that they did not do a good job in the Ohio State contest dealing with the crowd noise, and that they would be ready for this ball game. It will not surprise them in any way, shape, or form if they turn microphones on the crowd and they can't hear themselves think. They will have that aspect of it fixed, because that was the one thing he was really upset about, that they had not. That was the one preparation thing I think that they worked on crowd noise that week, but they didn't think it was going to be any to that degree, if you know what I'm saying.
Don, we effective yesterday on this radio program now, when teams have self-inflicted errors that cost them the game, we now call that pulling a Colts. So we you know what I mean? We know what you mean. I don't think that we'll see that with Notre Dame, but we shall see, right? The only thing I ask is that as many times as you can during the broadcast is if you reference during this college football playoff game. Can you simply, we'll take a timeout and come back to this college football playoff game, because it still is, it's awesome, right? It's awesome. It's surreal. It's all of it. But let's go to the other side of things. I know it's still obviously just getting into Big Ten play. My frustration with Indiana from the basketball side of things, clearly we know they have good players. And it almost seems like with each game, a different player has been their kind of go-to guy. Why do you think it is? Was it what Nebraska was doing against Indiana that was making it difficult for Indiana to get? I mean, they got 35 looks at the three-point shot, but their Mbako, for example, why could I know he had the foul trouble early? What is Indiana not doing to facilitate to get shooters in rhythm?
That I can't answer. I'm not an X and O guy. I'm looking at a basketball team that has shot the three-point shot really pretty well this year compared to years past. From what we've seen previously, and in this particular contest, they chucked up 35 threes, which is totally uncharacteristic of what Woodson's teams have done ever since he's been here. And I don't know if it was, if they panicked, if they thought the only way they could get back into the game was shooting threes. But if you think about the game itself, there was 6 minutes or about 6.5 minutes left in the game. Indiana was down only 3. And then they just couldn't make anything. And I think they did chuck up more threes than you would normally see in that area of the game, simply because they were trying to get back in it and thought that they could with a three-point shot, but they weren't go down. 1 of 18 from the field in that last 6.5 minutes. So honestly, this ball club is still very much in flux in the sense of guys playing their roles and all those kinds of things. I think it's still a ball club that definitely has a lot of work to do to get this chemistry right and to find the rotations that they need to have in each ball game. And at this juncture, I think they're still, and I don't want to say experimenting because I don't think that's the right word for it, but I don't think they found those combinations just yet. If they find them, this is going to be a really good basketball team. If they don't, it's going to be another year like last year.
It's kind of one of the things, Don, and Indiana it's not exclusive to Indiana. When you have a roster that has, when you're using the portal, and I get it, I mean, that's a necessary part of college basketball today, but it requires further into the season before guys instinctively know who's on the floor around them, etc. Now, having said that, in your opinion, I think we could say Malik Reneau is probably Indiana's most consistent player. Who would you say is second?
Well, that's a tough question to answer because outside of that, I don't know that anybody's been greatly consistent. I mean, Trey Galloway has had really good games and games where he hasn't done much, at least from a scoring perspective. And obviously, Caden Carlisle is a guy who just came off of 4 games where he was missing because of injury, played really well in that first game back against Minnesota and didn't play very well at all against Nebraska. I just think, Jake, right now that this team is still trying to find itself. and they're going to have a week here to get ready for Tennessee Chattanooga on Saturday, along with semester exams, that kind of stuff that's going on as well. But they will have plenty of time to work out some of these kinks. But again, I think this is a ball club that's got to be put together, just like every coach that I talk to. I'm not kidding you. Every single coach, and I've talked to every coach that we've played against this year, except the 2 games or the 3 games in the Bahamas because I didn't go.
Right.
But I've talked to every other coach this year on a pregame interview. Every single one of these coaches has said to me, we are still very much a work in progress because we got so many new faces. We're still trying to put it all together. And I think that's the whole scenario for just about everybody in college basketball these days.
Don, you've got obviously a lot going on between both teams. Did you finish your Christmas shopping? Have you started your Christmas shopping?
The good news there is that I've got a wonderful wife who takes care of most of it for me, so I don't have to worry too much about it. I do have to do the wrapping, but I hired that out this year.
Well, listen, Don, you better get her a Christmas gift. That's the thing. You got one gift that you're responsible for. Don't screw it up, okay?
I try not to do that. Trust me.
All right, Friday night, Hoosiers and Notre Dame from the football side of things. And then on Saturday, it will be Chattanooga for Indiana and the basketball side of things. And tonight, 7 o'clock, Inside Indiana Basketball with Mike Woodson and Don Fischer, 7 o'clock on this program. Don, we appreciate the time. As always, certainly enjoy it Friday night.
Hey, Jake, one other thing, too. We've got a special show coming up on Thursday night at 7:05. It's the time that we have our Indiana football coaches show on Thursdays. We have a special football coaches show this Thursday. It will not be live. It will be taped, but we'll have Coach Signetti on it, along with Scott Dolson, the athletic director, and 6 of Indiana's football players.
Very cool. All right, very cool. And you know what? Listen, Don, Scott Dolson, I certainly hope that he enjoys this as well, because that was when he went out and got Curt Signetti. It was an absolute home run hire, and he absolutely deserves every bit of enjoying this run as well. So that's cool that he's a part of that as well. Look forward to hearing that. Thursday night, you said, right?
Yes, Thursday night, 7:05, just like our normal football show.
All right, appreciate it, Don. We'll be listening.
You bet, guys. See ya.
All right, Don Fischer on the Express Pro Tires and Auto Guest Line. Yeah, the Indiana game against Nebraska. Look, there are a lot of teams that are going to go to Nebraska and get beat. But the fact that now that Indiana has dropped 4 straight to Nebraska by an average of just over 17 points a game amongst those 4, hard to swallow. I mean, it's like, really?
They also keep getting beat kind of the same way. Porous defense. The 3-point shot has still not been there in the Mike Woodson era. It's becoming a consistent trend of the way they lose these games.
We've got some news to report on the Indiana Pacers from our friend Scott Agnes. Good news, for that matter, and we'll tell you that next. Eddie's taking a page out of Corbin's book, Jimmy, which I like. I mean, I'm digging me some Boston there, right?
Of course.
But we had a meeting the other day we have several meetings around here. I got lots of meetings, big on meetings, right?
Because we're such a successful business here.
And we're always talking to focus groups. Focus groups are always telling us what they get out of their meetings. And in particular, the one thing that we know, some of the different segments that we do in the program, kids love it.
Adore it, Jake.
Totally.
Truly.
Huge. We're big with the kid audience, especially to get to know your listener. The kids absolutely love that. Now, the one thing they said the other day in the meeting, our focus group said, and they paid them $75,000, and they did two things. The first thing they did is they redesigned the IU logo by moving one line like an eighth of an inch. And then the other thing they did is they said, start playing younger music. Kids like younger music.
Yep.
And we said, okay, we gave Eddie the carte blanche on that, and he's all the way up to now 1977.
He's getting there, Jake. He's getting
now,
there.
speaking of...
when we had this meeting, I told you it was difficult because I grew up listening to 80s and 90s
listen,
rock.
I'm there with you. Trust me.
I didn't care for the music.
I'm all
like,
about it personally, Eddie. That's why you're my spirit animal. Speaking of spirit animals, did you see that Indiana, and we have Pacer news to get to here, but it looks like Indiana's is the kids say, because they said that we start using quotes that kids like. Indiana's dropping hints. They're dropping stuff, right? Looks like the Bison's back next year. Have you seen this?
So no, I thought your tweet was saying that Shady was back. Eminem.
No.
I saw your tweet about it. You and I are Team Bison. I love that. We both have throwback gear that has the Bison on it, but you're saying there's been more evidence to the fact that, because I thought I did see it like a scheduling graphic now that you say that too. So do you think they are legitimately
first
on the cusp here of the return?
Official Indiana football social media page, in announcing next year that Indiana will be playing at Oregon, they posted a graphic of 4 Bison moving their way out west, and it said Indiana will be at Oregon. Secondly, if you look at they had a schedule release, and in the schedule release, it has 2 horns bursting through the schedule. Now, for those that are unfamiliar, Indiana did have a Bison mascot in the 50s and 60s. It was brought back briefly in 1978. I don't know if IU still does this. When I was a kid, my favorite thing about IU athletics was the cup every year, the plastic cup. Do they still do that? It was different every I could literally, if you buy a Coke at an Indiana game, I mean, I haven't been to a game at Assembly Hall or Memorial Stadium in quite some time, but if you go down there, you would buy a cup. I could tell you, I still have a bunch of them from the 82 season, the 83 season, the 86. I could tell you what year the cup is just by looking at it. And one of the years they did it, it had the old Bison as the logo. That was like 78, I think, when they really had that going. But either way, looks like the Bison's back.
Yes.
Now,
please give me new Bison merch as well. I will spend that money gladly.
Will you really?
Yes.
Okay. As for the Pacers, we do have, Eddie, you can break out the sounder if you'd like, because it looks like we have a little bit of breaking news. This from Scott Agnes at Fieldhouse Files. It appears as though the Pacers are on the brink of closing a deal that would allow them to air at least 5 games this year over the air. In other words, for those that do not get the, is it the FanDuel Television Network, Pacers Television Network?
FanDuel Sports Network.
There are going to be at least 5 games. I'm not sure which 5 that will air on WTHR Channel 13 locally for those that do not have access to watching the Pacers on cable. Depending on when those games are, if it is before Christmas, it would be likely impossible for them to see the play of Aaron Nesmith, because it looks like, Eddie, we have information on Nesmith, correct?
Yeah, it just sounds like Nesmith will be out a couple of weeks. Rick Carlisle, I think it was in last Friday, maybe? I can't remember. Sometime last week, suggesting that Nesmith will be out a couple more weeks. So my guess is that Nesmith will not be back prior to Christmas, and the first opportunity then for Nesmith, the return, would be that 12-26 game, the game after Christmas, when the Oklahoma City Thunder are back in Gainbridge Fieldhouse. If not, then they go to Boston for 2 games after that. So that would be around the time that Nesmith could make his return.
So Aaron Nesmith, a key part of the Pacers without question. Yesterday, it was ugly what happened in Denver. And we're going to break that down and give you our thoughts on our frustrations. And I'll read some of the reaction yesterday from you fans as well. When we come back to the 2 o'clock hour here, Aquarian Company on a Monday, 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. I love this from my buddy Scott. My definition of focus groups is an assembly of strangers who will drink the drinks and eat your cookies. Then, as a way of thanking you for the treats and cookies, will tell you the opinions that they don't really believe, but they think that you want to hear. What I'm about to tell you now is not necessarily a focus group for the Indianapolis Colts because it's probably things they don't want to hear, but things they need to. Yesterday, the Colts went into a game in Denver where everyone knew that they needed to win to, for the most part, keep their playoff hopes alive. It was, for all intent and purposes, a playoff game. And yes, at the beginning of the year, I, Jimmy, Mike Chappell, most of us had said repeatedly that this year's primary focus was about the development of Anthony Richardson, and that anything that came above that would be gravy. And I'm not hedging from that except for to say that when you get to a situation where you have the most critical of games, that is an opportunity to not only assess Anthony Richardson, but assess the body of work that you have put around him. And in that latter part, the general manager of the Colts, Chris Ballard, has failed. Let me explain what I mean by that, because I don't think, when I was a younger man, a younger kid, notably, I would watch games of the teams that I was the most passionate about, and I would grow very angry because I would feel let down. And I would think to myself, this is all I've thought about all week. I've wanted so badly to win this game, and everything that I've done, I've just been fretting about it, but I don't have any control over it. And I just want to know and have the assurance that the people that do have control over what's happening care as much as I. And so nothing drives you more crazy than when you're watching a game and you feel like those that do have a direct responsibility and thumbprint on it are not being held to the fire and being held accountable for what you are witnessing that has caused you so much pain, sorrow, anger, etc. I understand that. I understand that we have here a platform that allows us for that accountability. But it can become with an irresponsibility. It can come with an irresponsibility if you just throw it around all over the place anytime that you're upset. I think you have to have evidence and backing for your claim. In the case of Chris Ballard, I go back to this. When the Indianapolis Colts had to make a coaching change, and Chris Ballard, his first big responsibility, he inherited Andrew Luck, but his first big responsibility was to go out and find a coach to grow his young quarterback, and he selected Josh McDaniels. He selected a guy that everybody knew was a snake, who obviously jilted the Colts at the 11th hour, and Chris Ballard had a little bit of egg on his face, and right there, that would normally be a pretty big strike. But the bigger strike there is the fact that Josh McDaniels, even before that and since then, has not really proven to be a great NFL head coach. So the lack of judgment there, to me, is one that you go, and you forget about it. But is it possible that right then Chris Ballard was showing us who he is when it comes to making big decisions? More so, he kicked the can down the road a million times at the quarterbacking position. One can certainly very easily and probably in an educated standpoint say it's because he never felt like the right quarterback was there for him to build his franchise around. Fine. He went with veteran, 11th hour guys. Maybe that's because he didn't feel there was a better option. Maybe it's because it allowed him to continue to just always buy another year for himself. But when it came down to it, once finally it came, where he knew that he had the decision to make to draft a franchise quarterback, Anthony Richardson is the one that he selected. And we all knew that Anthony Richardson was raw, and we all knew that Anthony Richardson would need time. But with that, to have the time and to be raw and to develop, what he needs were two things. He needed players around him, and he needed a culture of accountability, and culture is an overused word, but an atmosphere, a locker room of accountability and leadership to show him the way. Now, this year, it would appear as though Anthony Richardson did have an example of accountability and leadership because somebody, whether it was Shane Steichen, whether it was Chris Ballard, maybe it was Jim Irsay, somebody said, we don't like the way you're going about your business, so we're going to take away from you what you have, which is the starting keys to the franchise. And then, whether it was Anthony Richardson answering that question, whether it was the owner stepping in and saying, I want to see more of Anthony Richardson, I haven't seen enough, whether it was Chris Ballard, we don't know. But the keys were handed back to Anthony Richardson, and he showed promise. But He is still less than 50% in terms of his pass completions. He still has no tight end to throw to, and that's an area that everybody and their brother, like the most coveted billboard on 465 because it gets the most eyeballs, is the one just before you come around on 465 north and start towards 465 east. Just before you get to Pickwick, there's a huge billboard there. That billboard alone had a huge sign that said, tight end, please. Everyone knew it. And I think Chris Ballard probably tried to get up to get Brock Bowers, but he didn't address the tight end room. And then when he was asked about it, he was a little smug. Because that's kind of sometimes in the fewer and fewer press conferences that he does, it's his MO. He's a little smug, knows more than you. The wide receiver position, when everybody was saying, you got to get wide receivers, and he kept saying, no, we like our guys. Mike Strawn, we like our guys. He's a little smug because he does that really well. And then once he finally addressed the wide receiver position, he made sure to let people know, like, yeah, frickin' Bowen, every time I turn around and read, he's talking about receivers. Well, how you like me now? I addressed the receiver position. He addressed it by Josh Downs, good player. And this year, he addressed it in not at the top of the draft, drafting a wide receiver or a tight end, but waiting until round 2 and getting one that had slipped through the cracks because of red flags in A.D. Mitchell. And that leads me to the big points yesterday that indict Chris Ballard. A.D. Mitchell fell to where he was in the draft because there were red flags about him. That wasn't going to be a problem in Indianapolis because there was a culture of the fact that so long as you have great leadership and veteran players, you can take the occasional flyer because they learn from the example placed above them. Who's the leader of the Colts offense? Is it Anthony Richardson, a young player who was benched this year because he wasn't mature enough to understand all that goes into it? Is it Michael Pittman Jr., who's a really good player, but has been hurt and is not out there all the time? Does play through injury. I got no problem with Michael Pittman. Is it Josh Downs, who himself is just a second-year player? Or is it Jonathan Taylor, who might be your best offensive player? Probably is your best offensive player. And yesterday, Jonathan Taylor has a play that is the microcosm of this 2024 Colts team. He dropped the ball because the Colts had a situation where it was all there before them and in front of them, and they went out, and instead of seizing the moment, instead of taking control of it, instead of wrapping their arms around the neck of the Denver Broncos and saying, we are going to take control of this game and get ourselves in the playoffs, they got a half a yard short, and Jonathan Taylor dropped the ball, literally and figuratively. And it swung the game. And that team from that moment on absolutely had no accountability. They had no discipline. They had no attention to detail. And they had no accountability because this is what Shane Steichen had to say after the game. When Shane Steichen was asked about Jonathan Taylor, who, to the line's credit and to the defense's credit, had a situation and a chance to put that game away for the most part. And Jonathan Taylor, before he got to the goal line, dropped the football, and you would think that the coach would say, that is unacceptable, that is something we cannot tolerate, that is something we're going to have to sit down and talk about, that is something we're going to watch on film, that is something we're going to go over in the locker room. You would think that here's the perfect opportunity to set a tone with your leader, to let people know it's unacceptable. And Shane Steichen said this.
It was a mistake. Obviously, it hurt us, but, he's one of our leaders, and sometimes that happens in football, but, he's our guy, and that's where it's at.
Okay. He's one of our leaders, and yeah, sometimes it happens. So you cannot sit here and tell me that leadership is exuded by accountability and culture, and that you can take a flyer on a guy like A.D. Mitchell because of the fact that your leaders show that accountability is there. There's no personal accountability. There's no coach accountability. And then A.D. Mitchell, just making sure, because A.D. Mitchell, the one thing he learned is he wanted to make sure that that Jonathan Taylor wasn't alone in costing him that game yesterday. A.D. Mitchell, who hasn't made a play all year, probably the best play he made was he knows what it means to throw the ball away because Anthony Richardson had a situation in the first half where he was rushed out of the pocket, intentionally throws it away, and you have to set disclaimer with Anthony Richardson and the ball goes 9 feet over somebody's head out of bounds. You got to make the disclaimer, whether that was by design or whether he was actually trying to throw to somebody. This one was by design because Richardson was flushed and was throwing the ball away literally. And he hit 80 Mitchell. Congratulations, 80 Mitchell. You were a target. Problem is you were on the sidelines. You're a second-round pick. You've got a receiving core that, Alec Pierce was out with concussion, which is probably the only reason why 80 Mitchell even then at that point gets reps. But at this point, 80 Mitchell's on the sideline. A ball comes to him. He didn't even catch that. I think it hit him like on the shoulder pad, and then he picked the ball up and spun it. But 80 Mitchell had an opportunity to make a play. He had an opportunity to make a play. They throw it over to him, and he sits, and he spins the ball, and he lines up the laces, and he looks around, and he puts his finger in the air, and he tests that mile-high wind, and he looks at Anthony Richardson and says, hey, I'm going to throw the ball back to you right now in case anybody doesn't know, and it's picked off pick six. And here's what 80 Mitchell had to say after the game about that play.
I said, if it's not there, throw it away. So if you kind of look from my perspective, it was there pretty much until 15 to turn to Ed Reed and just came through out of nowhere. So, it was a great play by him, so we just got to execute it better.
So was he not throwing it away and he was trying to make a play? He forecasted it way too much, and why they would put that kind of a play in there. Shane Steichen outthought himself, got too cute. 80 Mitchell, yes, it was a great defensive play, no question about that, but it was totally forecasted, and he took way too long to develop it. And the bottom line is, those moments were a microcosm of the Colts season, because this is a year this year where the pieces around Anthony Richardson have not been delivered. The accountability that they talk about has not been expressed. The leadership that they said was going to be there for young players has not been shown. And that all starts at the top. And after now 8 seasons of same song and dance, it's like a Netflix show. Chris Ballard is the best there is at teasing from one season to the next. The cliffhanger, next season's when we get the answer. Next season's where we get the answer. Next season's where we get the answer. We're in year number 8. We're at 60, 68, and 1. We're on a decade-long drought without a divisional title. It's embarrassing. It is disappointing. I'm not angry. I'm not frustrated. I'm disappointed. Because this fan base, this city deserves better than that. It is the same old song and dance. And Jimmy, this is a franchise that is totally spinning its tires in the mud.
I am angry because there's nothing to indicate to me that anything's going to change. Like, Chris Ballard has had worse screw-ups than what the 2024 Indianapolis Colts have become. And Jim Irsay, for whatever reason, drinking the Kool-Aid and the wizardry and the car salesman ability of Chris Ballard to buy more time and extend his window of excuse making, it continues on a cycle of repeat. And the other thing about yesterday that's gotten lost because of all the suck that was on display, be it the Jonathan Taylor drop short of the goal line, be it 80 Mitchell taking time to plan his post-game meal while getting the laces right and looking to the left and not being able to realize that there is a defender there and Benito kind of lurking, and everybody at that point knows double pass, and his instructions were clearly throw it away if it's not there. And he didn't. He decided to go ahead and take the chance because it worked in practice. I mean, I wish we could see the tape of how well the play itself worked in practice. Aside from all of that, the thing that bugs me the most, and it's always one of the most dangerous things for a fan base, is when fans start to be in your boat, Jake. I'm not saying like you're a diehard Colts fan by any stretch, but I mean, they're not angry, they're disappointed, or they're bored by it. And that's the bigger issue. There's nothing about this Colts team outside of maybe a player or two that's interesting. That game was a awful watch yesterday, and it was supposed to be a playoff game. It was ugly. It was not a fun, like, you would have been more entertained, and I did at times, flipping on the second screen to Red Zone to see all the other aspect of it. Forget Red Zone. Let me take a step back for a second.
Or the Pacers game.
Sure, but we'll give the Pacers their moment in a second. This is about the big, but you're right. Yes, I did have that on, and that was far more entertaining because they appear to be figuring a little bit out in a 2-game sample size. And I'd like to talk about Thomas Bryant at some point this week. It's nice to have him in a Pacers uniform. But the rest of the country got to see 90 points put up between Lions-Bills, but geographically restricted because the Colts, and I get it, you had to watch that mockery of football between two teams that are fringe playoff teams as it is. Like, Denver's probably in a better state, but the Colts The second it got announced that Alec Pierce was out for that game, I mean, there were other lines to be said, but any hope of a comeback, of that deep miracle prayer, A.D. Mitchell's now the one that's going to be on the recipient of those, and he doesn't catch passes. Also, with the trick play, Jake, aside from the fact it was an asinine play call based on situation, area of the field you were, game script till 12 and a half to play, why is A.D. Mitchell the focal point of that play? Like, I'm glad it worked so well in practice. Why is he the guy that you say to yourself, yeah, that's who we want to trust in that situation?
Right.
Like, I don't know how, even if you want to try to save face and say that was a good play design, the idea of A.D. Mitchell being the one that is running that play when there's been nothing of confidence or substance for him all season is baffling.
They absolutely outthought themselves.
It's the second time they've ran that play. They ran it against Jacksonville. A.D. Mitchell was the guy throwing the pass. It was to Tyler Goodson, and it went for 24. So it's not the first time they've tried to run it this season either.
Okay, well then that, to your point, Eddie, is more of a reason that A.D. Mitchell should have known not to throw the ball cross field when it takes him 5 seconds to figure out where he's throwing the football.
Look, the reality is this. It worked once against Jacksonville a gabillion years ago. He's been a disappointment of a player. I know he's a rookie. But what area this year have the Colts shown growth and progress?
Josh Downs is about the only one. Josh Downs continues to show he's a reliable piece.
What area that Chris Ballard told us, and you know what? I'm going to be honest. Maybe I shouldn't be this candid. But I mean, I'm in overtime anyway, right? In both my life and probably my career. Human nature comes into play with things. It just does. And I try my hardest to not let human nature affect and sway my thoughts. I try my hardest to make sure that I am objectively opining about things. But human nature does come into play when I look at Chris Ballard and assess him, because I think he's been really smug. And I think he's acted like the smartest guy in the room all the time. And the reality is that, and I'm not talking about to me, I'm talking about the way I've seen him respond to and handle and talk to our colleagues. And I've heard stories of him being a great guy and being really good to fans, and that's important. I mean, that's great. So I don't think he's a bad person. I just think in moments that there are part of the job description of being the general manager of an NFL team is being able to talk to your fans and keep them abreast of what's going on. And the way you do that, he doesn't owe us, the media, anything, but he owes his fan base and the ticket base something. And the way that he does that is by speaking to them, and we are nothing more than the middleman vehicle that allows that, or maybe their website or whatever. But it used to be every, twice a year, 3 times a year. Now it's like not at all. And when he does, more often than not, it's kind of defensive. But I'm not the one who said that if the corners this year, for example, don't work out, or the tight end room doesn't work out, I'm not the one who said that Chris Ballard could be fired. Jim Irsay's not the one that said Chris Ballard could be fired. Shane Steichen is not the one that said Chris Ballard could be fired. Anthony Richardson is not the one that said Chris Ballard could be fired. Chris Ballard is the one that said Chris Ballard could be fired. And every year, it's a different twist. Like, did you ever play the board game Clue?
Oh, yeah.
When you play the board game Clue and you've got it and you're like, I finally got it solved. It's Colonel Mustard in the library with the rope. And they're like, ooh, that's not right. You've got 2 of them, but that's not, and you're like, darn it. And it's back to the drawing board. It's
always the billiard room,
I got to wait like another round, right? So then you're like, it's Colonel Mustard in the billiard with the rope.
Yep. Good call.
And like, no, it's not it. And you're like, oh. So you just got to keep going back. There's always something that continues the game. And with Chris Ballard and the way this team is constructed, and I know it's hard. It's hard to build rosters. I get it. But the way this team is constructed, it's like there's always going back to the game. And at what point do you finally say, look, we can't even accurately assess where and who Anthony Richardson is because we have no idea. It just feels like there's a million areas that are taking on water.
I think Colts fans, Jake, should also ask themselves this question as we get closer to the offseason. Because, yes, they're still mathematically alive, but you're going to need the Chargers to self-implode and also this Colts team play competent football against bad teams, which they've shown they can 3 straight times. But I'm saying the season's done. Look at each core member of this team and start first with Chris Ballard and work your way down. And imagine that same day, it's been announced that they've been relieved of their duties. Would you miss them? Would your feeling as a Colts fan be the franchise has been set back because of that
I think there
move?
are people that feel like Steichen might still have a little something in it.
And that's, but you got to work your way down. To your point, start
but
from the
Steichen
top down.
doesn't appear to have to hold people accountable.
Look, if
he
they
did with Richardson, if that was his call.
If they said tomorrow that they clean house with everybody, I'm not going to fight you on it. Like I'm not going to. I get the argument for Shane Steichen because it's only year 2 and they're going to finish with a winning season and all. Like I in all likelihood, if they win out. I get that, but I'm also not at a point where he's done anything where I'm going to fight for him. But my question to your suggestion, which is you got to start at the top, start with Ballard, then go Steichen and his staff, and then go Anthony Richardson. And ask yourself as a Colts fan, if that person you were told same day, hey, they're no longer a Colt, would you feel like the franchise was in disarray? And if the answer is no, what are we still doing here?
Listen. There is a scene in Seinfeld, and I know I'm referencing something 30 years ago, but I think most people have seen this scene because it's a famous clip where Jerry Seinfeld is renting a car, and he goes to the car rental place, and the lady says, "We don't have your reservation." And he says, No. You know how to take the reservation. You just don't know how to hold the reservation. And then he says, anybody can get a reservation. You just got reservations. And he does the thing where he's like just kind of like grasping at stuff that's floating all over the air. And that's kind of how this Colts franchise feels. Anybody can talk about building a roster, but you don't know how to reserve a roster. Like, they're just kind of grasping all over the place. We're going to draft Liatu Latu, and look, hypocrisy exposed by me. I said at the time I thought he was going to be a great player, and he still may be, to be honest with you. He has shown flashes for sure. But was that a need? Was that their biggest need? Or was it the pick that was the safest that allowed Chris Ballard 3 years from now to go, but look who he took in the first round right here?
It's his white whale, Jake. He can't escape the edge rusher accusations.
Totally. But is it? But that wasn't the
correct.
biggest
They had bigger
need.
needs. Yes.
They had DeForest Buckner. They had Kwity Paye. At some point you got to rely on and believe in the players that you already have put in there, right?
Yeah.
And he didn't. He just kept rehashing that and neglecting other areas. And to me, it is a roster that is not awful in any one area, but it's not beyond very good in any one area. And I know that this year has always been about the development of Anthony Richardson, but you've done him a disservice because you have put him in situations that are not advantageous. He doesn't have tight ends. He doesn't have a safety net. He doesn't have, for that matter, you know what you have in your running back? Your leader, the guy that's your leader. Your leader last year, when he should have been working with your young quarterback, wasn't there in camp because he was busy in the Magic bus with Jim Irsay, hashing out a deal, holding his team hostage for more money. At the time that was the most critical, Jonathan Taylor wasn't there because he was holding out. And then maybe that was the time where they learned when you drop the football after you score a touchdown. Maybe that's when that was taking place. And then this year, Jonathan Taylor's healthy and seemingly really nice guy, wonderful talent, don't get me wrong, but he makes the biggest boneheaded decision as a veteran leader of this team that exposes himself as a neophyte rookie-level player in the most critical moment, in the most critical game, and it sinks his team's season. And that's the guy that you're claiming is supposed to be one of your leaders who then trickles down. It's like trickle-down economics. The leadership up top and culture. And that's going to trickle down to a guy like A.D. Mitchell. And that's the example he sees. What A.D. Mitchell sees is a guy who is supposed to be one of the marquee players on the franchise that held out and got more money. And now when the season's on the line, makes the most critical of errors. And afterwards his coach says, it happens.
The other thing that's been overshadowed too this year, it doesn't excuse Anthony Richardson's bad play because there's still moments where he misses the layups. You could have a comedic highlight reel of drops that this receiving core has had this year. Like they're one of the worst teams in that regard this season. The drops have been ever present too. Like it's a flawed team. Like for every praise that we can hand out for Josh Downs or for Alec Pierce's growth or Michael Pittman Jr. powering through back pain, there's been an ugly drop assigned to each one of them. And that's the overarching theme here is that you need to look at everything from the top down on this roster and ask yourself, Jim Irsay included, not in terms of Jim Irsay being relieved, but Jim Irsay needs to do this exercise as well. Would the Colts be worse off without them? And if the answer is no, then this needs to be an off-season of change for them.
Telling you. Netflix, man. The Colts season on Netflix. Hey, if you watch the Colts season on Netflix, I'm a little behind. Don't tell me what happens, but I'm telling you right now, season 8's been a roller coaster. Is there going to be a season 9? Oh, just wait. Cliffhanger. Next year's the year they're going to address the tight end situation. And then maybe they'll start getting a pass rush.
Oh, wait, get this plot twist. It's a journeyman tight end that's on his sixth team in the last 4 years, and he's just looking for a fresh start.
As using, like Frank's password on Netflix and stuff, and then we got rid of him, but we got the new guy. And, so I guess I need his password for season 9, so I'll keep him around. Same old song and dance, man. Same old song and dance. And yesterday when Colts fans were telling me they were frustrated, they were angry, they were PO'd, they were at their wits' end, they were hurt, I understand all of that. And I'll go back to what my parents used to say to me all the time. Shocking, I realize. I wasn't any of those things, but I was disappointed because I know of a fan base and a city and a ticket-buying group that all saw a game that they felt was the one that as fans they gave their greatest attention to detail. They set aside the holiday party, they set aside the Christmas shopping, they set aside putting up the tree, whatever it might be, to watch that game, and all they asked for is the same in return. And they got a team in the second half of that game that had no discipline, no attention to detail, and no focus. 25 minutes for the hour. Jake Query along with Jimmy Cook, Eddie Garrison here as well. Colts yesterday, like I said, disappointing in Denver. Easiest way to say it. Do I think that means that there's going to be a change at the end of the year? I don't know that. I mean, I don't know that. I don't know that anybody knows that. And the true, I think, paradox of it all, if you really look at it objectively, is I think that there is enough body of work to justify either way. If you want to say that they need to make a change at the top, I think that's a justified position. If you want to say that there is still evidence that Chris Ballard should return for season 9, that's also, you can make that argument as well. That part of it is what I think becomes frustrating.
Can you do that without the first thing on your list of defense of Chris Ballard being, well, the quarterback's only been here for 10 games or 2 seasons, whatever you want to call it. Like, isn't Anthony Richardson, for lack of a better phrase, the meat shield for any Chris Ballard defense? Like, I don't know what else it would be. It can't be overall talent development. Like, maybe you can make the argument against the rest of the league, he's a average drafter. Like, maybe you could make that argument, I guess. But if you're defending Chris Ballard long term, I don't see how there's another defense for him other than, well, have we really given Anthony Richardson enough time and this was supposed to be his guy? Like, I don't know what else the argument would be.
Right. Him being handcuffed.
Can you elaborate?
You guys have hinted at it sometimes that there could be a situation where Ballard's been handcuffed on spending money.
Well, yeah, if he's handcuffed in that regard, then that goes back to my overall take of I'll believe he's gone when I see the body. Because I think that, yes, there is an argument to be made that if you're in a world where he is operating, and we've discussed this on the show before, with a budget different to what Spot Rack or whatever would say the Colts cap space is, then there would in theory be a bigger margin for error for him by Jim Irsay and ownership for the mistakes, for these shortcomings. Like, if that is a world we live in where he is being handcuffed in the way he can operate, to Eddie's point, I'm not saying it's right. I think it's still foolish, but then the goalposts are being moved now to a different place of retention for Chris Ballard.
239-1070 is the telephone number. Mike, what's going on?
Hi. Good afternoon. Hey, I love your show. You're doing a great job. Everything you said is spot on. I told them I was a season ticket holder since 1984, day one. And even back in the days when we were pretty bad, before Peyton Manning, the Colts were enjoyable to watch. It was a big deal. Now, they're just a flat embarrassment.
Is that because? Let me ask you this though, Mike. I guess to their credit, is that because of the standard that you've seen before now that has been placed by the franchise?
Absolutely, absolutely. If it wasn't for Peyton Manning, and he built this franchise down here, and now it's going away. It's going away, and people don't have interest. A couple of weeks ago, when we lost to Detroit, I got home and my wife laid my season ticket order form on my desk. You know, I promptly turned around and spent $6,000 to the Colts. And now I am so frustrated. I'm so embarrassed to be a Colts fan right now. And I'm a dyed in the wool go Colts, but it's terrible.
But you renewed, right?
It's enough to have one boneheaded play in a game, but to have two? Come on.
Did you renew?
I renewed. I sent him the money. I'm wondering why, but I want to know about Shane Steichen. The man is, in my business that I was in, we always preach you got to have fun to do your job. And I don't think Shane Steichen's having a bit of fun. You look at him on his morning talk show on Sunday mornings, I forget what they call it, and you just look at the guy, he is not having
he is definitely, Mike, I appreciate the call. Steichen is definitely one of those that's just completely locked in, right? Like he's like a football savant. I mean, I have no idea whether he's having fun or not, but I will say when we had him at Colts camp, you know, he has that laser focused tunnel vision almost, but like in a fun way. I mean, you know what I mean? I
ran into him at a restaurant during the offseason. Like he seems like a very like friendly, down to earth guy. But yeah,
he's just
in terms of
ball.
All ball.
Yes,
yep. All
correct.
business.
Yep.
Tyler.
Hey, Jake. First, I want to see your Hey Jude from last Friday and raise you a Don't Stop Believing.
Don't Stop Believing's a good one, but I don't know if you get 45 consecutive seconds. That's my only point.
See, I feel like you can pull any snippet from that song and people know it.
I don't disagree, but it doesn't have 45 consecutive seconds a lot of times of sing-along because there's a lot of musical interlude in it.
Fair. Second, I feel like we often walked away from Frank Reich's games saying that he called a play-calling clinic and things like that more than we have the offensive guru, Shane Steichen. And I was curious your thoughts on that.
Say that one more time.
I feel like we walked away from Frank Reich's games more saying he called a play-calling clinic or things of that nature more often than we have the so-called offensive guru, Shane Steichen. And I was curious your guys' thoughts on that as well.
Here's the thing. My thought on it is it's a little bit different because there's a different caveat under which he is having to call games talking about Steichen because he has a lesser-known quantity at the quarterbacking position. I mean, you're having to build so much of the plays that he's calling now are plays that he is designing for Anthony Richardson to develop Anthony Richardson, so we don't know what sort of a curve on which to grade him, if that makes sense. That's the
There's
challenge
complexities
there.
as well
It's
that
not
I think
apples
Shane
to apples.
Steichen would like to utilize that you just can't right now with where Anthony Richardson's development is, except for trick plays. Apparently they're not afraid of those.
Is it Daryl, Eddie? Is that right? Daryl, what's up?
How you doing, gentlemen? Great show.
Thank you.
I think Ballard stayed his welcome by about 5 years. The guy never does anything to make this franchise any better. It's the same thing year after year, and everybody's put up with it until now. Now everybody's upset. Now everybody's pissed off when it should have been taken care of years ago. What this franchise needs to do right now, they need to get rid of Ballard. They need to bring a GM that can build this team because that's what they're going to have to do. They're going to have to rebuild. They need to get a hold of Sam Donald's agent and get him away from Minnesota because he is a free agent at the end of this year and start all over again.
The problem is, here's the thing, and I get it. I mean, Darnold's name, there are going to be guys that are going to be named there.
There's also not a Justin Jefferson on this roster for the
correct.
record.
I mean, a lot of that
Or a
in
Jordan
terms
Addison.
of those kinds of players and the guys like that can pop, it has a lot to do with the players that are around them, right?
Yes.
And I will say, in Ballard's defense, I mean, it's not like great GMs grow on trees. I mean, it's not the easiest job in the world. I get it.
It's
I
the
totally
tenure
get
and
it.
the amount of time that you keep highlighting. No one else has retained a job like his for this length with accomplishing less. It's well documented. It's crazy.
Do you have plays of the day?
Yeah.
All right, we'll do it next.
Today's plays of the day, a good mix of the NFL as well as one NBA play for you. We'll start first in the association. I'll take the Miami Heat to one of the money line on the road against the Detroit Pistons. 2 games tonight in the NFL for Monday Night Football, starting about 15 minutes apart from one another. We'll start with the game that kicks earlier, 8:15. It's the Bears and the Vikings in NFC North showdown in Minnesota. I will take halftime, full-time. That means the Vikings have to lead at halftime and lead at the end of the game over the Chicago Bears. That's about minus 150 versus the minus 300 you're giving them to just win outright. So you're laying 150 there juice-wise. But they got to lead at halftime. They got to lead by the end of the game as well. Also for the Vikings, I'll take Jordan Addison as anytime touchdown scorer. For Falcons Raiders, I'll lay the 6 on Atlanta on the road in Las Vegas. They're 6-point favorites. So Heat money line, give me Vikings halftime, Vikings full-time, Addison anytime touchdown scorer, and lay the 6 on the Atlanta Falcons. Eddie, any plays for you?
Yes. In the Atlanta-Vegas game, Bijan Robinson, I am zeroing in on the yards prop for him. Just wanted to sound fancy by saying zeroing in there.
You sound like someone covering NBA draft day coverage. Proud of you.
Yeah, thank you. I will zero in on him. Over 84.5 rush yards. I think the Vegas rush defense will be very, very bad. No Max Crosby anymore for them. And Bijan has been the primary workhorse for Atlanta. Tyler Algier, take a seat. And it's been pretty much all Bijan.
Remember that Antonio Pierce moment we had where we thought the Raiders were going to turn it around and then they were the Raiders?
Man, is there? I mean, other than the heritage and the color scheme, and I mean, and the fact that
it's
in
a cool
Vegas
logo.
of the Raiders,
Yeah.
I mean, is there any team that has just fallen into more irrelevancy?
No, I don't think so. Not that had it and then lost it. You could say Dallas, but like they're still in the playoffs. Not this year, but in years past they've been. At least they've been
the Jets
around the mix. Probably they haven't really had it though. Like
how
in my
bad
lifetime.
has that experiment gone? By the way, the Pacers are obviously off for a couple of days. They're in Phoenix next on Thursday, but we didn't even talk about this, that over the course of the weekend, we knew that they were going to have to do something about the backup center position. They bring back former Indiana star Thomas Bryant. Jimmy seems to like that.
I love Thomas Bryant, man. That's a player that was there when I was at IU. I always loved his energy then. He's always been an energy first to the floor type of guy throughout his NBA career. Look, a front court bench piece that was given for potato chips isn't going to like change the full fortune of your season. But with the budget you were operating with, to add front court depth and get a player of his caliber, I'm really excited about him being in the fold now.
And they gave up, I mean, obviously nothing for him. I mean, What did they give up, a second-round pick? And they have
like a
10
pick
of them?
swap or something.
In like 2031 or something, I don't know.
Yeah, no, he fits exactly what they need. His numbers aren't going to jump off the page every night, but if you're getting 5-6 points from him a night, couple rebounds, block shot or two, that's exactly what you want front court depth-wise.
I mean, that's what you need for certain.
Kind of like how he performed yesterday. 3 shots, makes them all, 7 points, 2 rebounds, and a block. That's all you need him out there
does his
for.
job, does his work. Good player.
And, you know, I thought Moses Brown played well, to be honest with you.
We'll never forget that opening to
right
whatever game that was where he scored the first 10. I can't remember who
So
they
when
played.
they, made that decision to not bring him back, you thought, okay, well, they got to have something up their sleeve. And then here it is with Thomas Bryant in the fold. But again, Pacers in action at Phoenix coming up on Thursday. Was a good win for them last night in New Orleans. And, Siakam and, for that matter, Jarris Walker starting to give them a little something. And Halliburton, from the distribution standpoint, that has not been a problem for him. Shooting the ball has been the real challenge.
Last 10 games for Halliburton, this is from the Pacers Twitter account, averaging 22 points on 50% shooting, 41% from beyond the arc, 8 assists, and about a steal and a half a game. Look, I'm not saying that he's fully back. I'm going to need to see it over like a month's time before I'm not as worried, but he's looked better. You're starting to get a little bit healthier, add a couple more bodies in there. You win 2 games in a row. Yes, that's where the bar is for the first time in over a month. Now just win some games on the road, stack a couple performances, and then you can really get feeling comfortable as you get closer and closer to the All-Star break and the trade deadline.
JMV's birthday, right?
Yeah.
And he is at Twin Peaks in Greenwood, is that right?
Oh, yeah. Can't think of a better place to be.
Plenty of time to get out and enjoy an ice-cold beverage. Diet Coke's perfectly sufficient down in Twin Peaks, as JMV will, I'm sure, continue the conversation regarding the Colts and the Broncos and where they go from here after that disappointment yesterday. Now, Jimmy, did you say, which one of you guys said that you went to the Indy Classic?
I did.
Eddie did.
Good atmosphere, you said?
Oh, yeah. It was a great atmosphere for that first game, for sure.
I thought
they did a terrible job with the scheduling. I'm not trying to disparage the Indiana Sports Court, but personally, I would have flopped those games, flip-flopped, because the contingency of fans there was primarily Purdue, and once that Purdue game was over, it was like a 50% Gainbridge Fieldhouse attendance-wise. There was a lot of empty seats.
They still haven't recovered from what it was at its core. When that was Indiana, Butler, Purdue, and Notre Dame, you had great showings across the board for all fan bases involved. And I get why it happened, and I don't want to get into the reasons rehashing for why it happened, but when it was a local event and it was the Circle City Classic at its truest form, it took on a life of its own.
I'm still old enough to remember. I just loved. Back in my day, I loved the Indiana-Kentucky games at the RCA Dome where it was just half split. Like it was split half side blue, half side red. I mean, that was just such a massive, massive deal. And maybe it was because I was a kid, and then later, like when I was in college, it felt like the entire sports world was paying attention, but it did feel like the entire sports world was paying attention. I mean, it was pretty awesome. It was pretty awesome for certain. I did call Jimmy over the weekend because I was watching soccer and I needed his soccer advice. The team that Ipswich, I told you that's my club, right? I'm all in.
Correct, yeah.
But then
they lost your shirt or your kit in the mail. You tried to order one, right?
Here's the thing. I was watching that Nottingham Forest.
Yeah.
And they've got a cool little logo with the little tree on it, understandably. And Robin Hood's from there. And then I saw them get a very exciting win and keeping themselves right out of the relegation zone or whatever. And so I think now I'm in on them.
I like it.
NF, right?
Let's go.
I'm
thrilled to see this. I want to see in 2025 a Nottingham Forest shirt on the back of one Jake Query.
I thank everybody for listening today to Query & Company. Thank you to Mike Chappell and Don Fischer. J&V birthday special for the birthday boy is up next. We'll be back with you at noon tomorrow on Query & Company.